You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers about hikers for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Welcome back to the podcast, our last one of the year, which appropriately brings a few things to a conclusion within the show. You're listening to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis, and I'm your host, Steve Adams, or the aforementioned Mighty Blue. This is episode number 406, and our guest today hiked the Appalachian Trail in my first AT year in the class of 2014. It's hard to believe for me it's going to be 10 years next year. Sarah Beatrice, or Too Long, met one of my hiking buddies that year, Stephen Martelli, or the Grizzly Bear from Maine. It was Grizz who reached out to me to suggest that I should chat with Sarah. I actually didn't meet her. Of course, we'll be talking about that 2014 hike, but I'll also be covering Sarah's after-hike life, which was far more exciting than mine. After Sarah, on the very last show of the year, we'll catch up with Jessica Lang-Wright as she makes it to Harpers Ferry to complete her own flip-flop and become a fully fledged thru hiker. I've said before, it hasn't always been pretty, but Jessica has been a wonderful example of sucking it up and getting it done by simply putting one foot in front of the other. We'll hear from Jessica, then a short message from one of our listeners, Hugh Ickreth, who travelled to be there to greet her at the end, along with his own little tribute for her. Then, in another closure for the show, we'll have the short, very poignant epilogue from George Stefanos as he concludes the epic telling of his own thru hike 40 years ago. You will not want to miss that. So, with another full show, let's meet an adventurous woman. Here's Sarah Beatrice. Today, I've got a fellow member of my AT class of 2014. This is Sarah Beatrice, or Too Long. Hey, Sarah, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Well, my pleasure. And your story is so much more than just the AT in 2014. But you were suggested to me by another member of that class, a buddy of mine, Stephen Martelli, or the Grizzly Bear from Maine. And I met Grizz on the approach trail that very first day, and he gave me the best advice I ever got on the trail. He said to me, you should treat an AT thru hike like 4 and 5 day hikes between stops in town. And it made it so much more manageable. And it's the best advice I think nice. I ever got. How did you run into him?
I ran into Grizzly Bear at the barn shelter.
Is it called Over Mountain Shelter, I think it's called?
Over Mountain Shelter.
The two-story red one, yeah.
Yeah, we were hiding out. It started raining, and we were hiding out. And then it stopped, and he suggested that we continue. So we continued, and then it started raining again, and it was a cold rain. And he's like, we got to keep moving. But there was a bald up ahead. I said, it's thundering, it's lightning. It's really dangerous to be on a bald with thunder and lightning. And he said, we just got to keep going. So I followed really closely behind him and Yellowbeard because they were taller guys. And I figured, hey, they're going to get struck first. I care about them. But I'm just thinking of survival mode. And I actually felt like a jolt, like not a jolt of lightning, but like I felt my hand get numb. And then I started hiking zigzaggy. And I was like, oh my goodness, what is this?
You weren't hiking zigzaggy to avoid the lightning, were you?
That's what I was thinking.
The things that go through our mind when we're hiking is kind of bizarre, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it is.
So, we obviously shared the trail at some stage, and all of us share the trail that year. You may be 2,000 miles apart, but you're sharing the trail.
Right.
And we didn't meet, but you must have passed me at some stage because I started on March 22nd and you went on the 31st. And then
yes.
You finished 10 days before me, of course, on September the 19th.
Yes.
And if you think back, that fat bloke who was struggling uphill, that would have been me as you breeze past. And it's funny, actually, because I've met quite a few people I was on the trail with in 2014, and a lot of us kind of agree, although I suspect most years think this, ours was a pretty good year to do it. If you remember, I don't think the weather was that bad at all, was it? I hear these nightmares now, but I think we had pretty good weather, didn't we?
I think we had pretty good weather. I honestly never set up my tent in the rain, and I never took it down in the rain.
Wow.
I don't know how that is even possible, but I never had to set it up in the elements. And I was like, that's 6 months almost of hiking without setting up in the rain.
Yeah.
It just blows my mind.
Yeah, I knew we had been pretty lucky with the weather. Funny enough, I haven't talked about it much at all, even on all these 400 odd episodes. I've not really talked about the weather that year, but it was certainly, I never found it too onerous, and I found some beautiful evenings hiking. So, I think it's the luck of the draw every time. I think we were pretty lucky. So what got you there in the first place? Had it been a lifelong dream or what?
It was not a lifelong dream. I went through a breakup and I started hanging out with new people, new inspiring people. And the one woman...
As opposed to the uninspiring one.
Yeah, he wasn't very inspiring.
Yeah.
So I met a woman named Cindy, and she knew that I took day hikes 2 or 3 miles around Pennsylvania, nothing crazy. And she was like, why don't you hike that Appalachian Trail? And I looked into it, and I was like, there's no way I could hike for 5 or 6 months. And then I bought a book on it. She took me to Barnes and Nobles, and I bought a book, and I started reading it. And at first it's like, yeah, maybe I could do this. And then you get further and further. And I was like, there's no way I could do this rock scrambling. There's no way I can run into these bears and rattlesnakes. And there's no way. And I just kind of like threw the dream out the window. And then I met then my friend Anna, she was dating a guy named Bad Dinner. That was his trail name. And he had done it before. And she was like, hey, I know that you bought a book on this and you might be interested in hiking the trail with us. And I talked to Bad Dinner, and he was like, oh no, it's not as bad and scary as you think it might be. So he talked me into it in a sense. And then we started planning and researching. And then Anna decided she did not want to do it anymore. And he broke up with her.
Oh, God.
And then I was like, well, I'm not going to do it if my friend's not going to do it. And then my dream went out the window, and then I thought about it. A few months went by, and then I thought, you know what? This was my dream too, and I'm not going to end it because they broke up. So I asked her to do the first week with me, and she agreed. And that's how I ended up on the trail.
But had you been preparing for it? Because you go from this, I can't do this, it's the snakes, the animals, the rock scrambles, all that sort of stuff. But what took you from that, I just can't do this, to, I want to do this thing? There must be something in it that was appealing to you as you're preparing.
It was like when I got out of that relationship, I just wanted to have my own identity because I didn't want to be so-and-so's ex anymore.
Oh, wow.
I wanted my own
identity. Is that how you saw yourself?
Yeah, I did.
Wow.
I did. And I just wanted my own identity, and I wanted a great adventure. And I was like, you know what? I thought about it for a long time, and I thought, I can do this. I can still do it.
But did you want to do it? Was this something that it became a passion with you, or was it something you wanted to take on because you wanted to challenge yourself and you wanted to get away from being whoever it was, ex?
Yeah, I wanted a great adventure, and I became obsessed with the idea. I started like obsessing over the gear and the trail and everything about it. So it became an obsession. And then I also wanted a great adventure. And when I told people about it, they were saying, oh, she'll never do it. She'll never succeed. And I wanted to do it to prove those people wrong.
Yeah, you mentioned when we spoke the other day that you face a lot of doubters.
Yeah.
Was it family? Was it friends? And why do you think they doubted you? Or did you doubt yourself?
It was mostly friends. My family thought I was crazy, and they know that I'm stubborn enough to finish something like this. But it was mostly friends, but not close friends. I'd say more acquaintances that doubted me.
What would be behind that?
The one guy
said... Surely not because you're a woman.
No. The one guy said, she'll never be able to leave technology that long. And I said, I don't even use technology that much.
Oh, dear. The doubters, and I'm absolutely not being sexist here, but I find people tell me about the doubters they had before are often women and not often men. Maybe because men are arrogant and they always think they can do everything. But I'm not sure. But I've heard this this several times, and I believe that you turned 29 on trail. How were you able to extricate yourself from what I presume was a growing career?
So I was working for my family business at the time.
That'll do it.
And, I had the flexibility to take time off. I asked my dad, I said, I'd like to do this Appalachian Trail. Can I have the time off? And he was like, if you really want to do it, yeah. And I said, well, I don't know. And I went back and forth a lot. And I finally said, hey, Dad, I'm going to do that trail. And he said, I know. But he supported me. He dreaded me going in a sense, but he also supported the idea that I went.
When you mentioned the doubters the other day, I presume your dad wasn't one of them.
No.
And did he? What did he do? Did he come and see you at all? Did you get people to come and visit you from your family or not on the trail?
So at trail days, actually, a group of my friends came down to visit me, nice. And they had planned to. And my mother called me and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm at trail days hanging out." "Well, where?" And I said, "Why?" She said, "Oh, I'm just shopping at Walmart." And I said, "You're shopping at Walmart?" I said, "Why are you so curious where exactly I am at trail days?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm just wondering." And I'm like, "Okay, well, I'm at the Harpers Ferry booth with my friend Brave." She was working the booth. And I was like, I just have a feeling that my mother is here. And I was like, there's no way. She doesn't travel. She's not going to be in Virginia. And some time went by, maybe 20 minutes. And I thought, oh, well, I guess she's not here. And I leave and I look to my right and there's my mom and dad. And I'm like, oh my God. I was like, my parents are here. And I cried. I gave them a giant hug. And I was like, oh my God, you guys came all the way down here. I'm like, did my friends know that came down to see me? And they're like, no, we kept it a total secret because we thought one of them would spill the beans.
Nice.
So nobody knew. And
so at that stage, let's think, Damascus is about 430 odd miles, 400 miles. I'm not quite sure. It's about 430 miles into it. So you were into the hike then. All those doubters, you said your friends turned up. Have they all kind of changed their view? Were they now following kind of enthusiastically?
So those weren't the friends that doubted me that came to see me.
Quite
but they knew I was going to continue. They had faith in me. I didn't have faith in me at that point. I was taking small goals. I said, at first I'll get to Hot Springs, North Carolina. Then I'll get to Damascus. Then I'll get to Pennsylvania. And I just had small goals instead of looking at Katahdin as the main goal.
I agree. I think it's a really good way to look at it as well, because it's ridiculous to start thinking of Katahdin when you're in bloody Georgia, isn't
it? And seeing those maps on the wall at hostels that you are here and you have like 3 more feet to go on a map.
Do you know one of the most dispiriting things I found was when I got to Harpers Ferry, I went to the ATC Conservatory. I've not even thought about this before now. And they've got this relief map laid out flat, and I know they did then in 2014 because I saw it then and you were there then. And you can see how far you've come. And you know how darn exhausted you are. And you look at the rest of it, and it's all bloody great mountains as well. You're thinking, how am I going to make that? I found it kind of off-putting that there was still so far to go at that stage.
It is off-putting. And I remember thinking, yes, I'm halfway done. And then I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I have another half to go. It was very daunting.
Yeah, it is. And one thing we spoke about, and we're going to come to the end of the AT in a minute, but one thing we spoke about the other day, you said if you ever went again, you would have got, had you had it time to do over again, you'd stay in more shelters. Why?
Yeah.
I think most people would stay in less shelters, I think.
I was so scared of thunderstorms, especially the ones that came up in the middle of the night. I would be in my tent peacefully sleeping, and 2 or 3 in the morning, violent thunderstorms. And I was so scared. That was actually those storms actually almost made me quit the trail several times. Wow. Yeah, because I was so afraid. And I thought, if I'm in a shelter, I'm around people, I have a roof over my head. A tree isn't going to fall down and totally smash me.
That's why you didn't have to pack up in the rain, because you're in a shelter of the thunderstorm night. Okay, got it. So you finished in September. once again, 10 days before me, and you didn't go back to the family business. After you did a bit of landscaping, I think, then you got into wilderness therapy. And when we talked about this the other day, I think you were about to pass on to what you were doing this year, but I want to talk about that now, actually. What exactly is it? What is wilderness therapy?
So wilderness therapy, I worked at Blue Ridge Therapeutic Wilderness in Georgia, and troubled kids get sent to these camps in the woods. And the kids are there for 10 to 12 weeks at a time. They could have anxiety, addiction issues. It could be a whole range of things that their parents send them to these wilderness camps. And the kids get all of their possessions taken from them, their phones. They get woods clothes, and they get shuttled out into the woods to these camps for 10 to 12 weeks. And my shift was 8 days on, 6 days off. And I would live in the woods with them. And we had therapists come in twice a week. And the therapist would say, okay, Sarah, you're working with these two kids. This is what I want you to work on with them. Let's go through the shame cycle. Let's try to get this kid to show emotion because he's not showing any emotion. So we had therapists telling us what to do within the group every weekly.
So you had no skills other than what you'd achieved being on the AT, I guess. You learn a lot on the AT about yourself as well.
Yeah, you do, right?
What did it give you then? What did this wilderness therapy give you?
It gave me confidence, and it gave me better communication skills. Because in high school, in any school, you're not really taught how to communicate. I didn't know what a boundary was until I started working in wilderness therapy. They said, hold boundaries with the kids. I'm like, well, I don't know what you mean by that. And I'm a smart person. And I'm like, what do you mean boundaries? They're like, just hold boundaries. And like before this, I thought saying no was rude, or I thought passive aggressive communication was proper because you don't want to hurt people's feelings. Now I'm brutally honest. I'm like, you don't like what I say? Too bad. I'm going to be totally honest. I'm going to say no.
And so what was it, the wilderness therapy that gave you that?
It was.
How interesting. So that actually had a bigger impact in many ways than the hike did, I guess. And what about the kids? Did you see growth in them? I
did, especially if I started with the same group and kept going back, because there's like 4 or 5 different groups, and they would say, Sarah, you're with G1 today, this week, or I might be with G2 the next week. But if I was consistent in a group, I would come back every other week and be like, wow, I'm really seeing this student go from point A to point B, and they're doing really good. A lot of them really progressed, especially if you got to watch their progression.
And you told me, kind of disappointingly, that when you did hear about how some of them, once they'd finished their 10 weeks, which sounds like a prison sentence, by the way, but once they'd done their 10 weeks, a lot of them regressed to what their life had been like before. So is that disappointing for you?
Yeah, because I worked with another program after wilderness therapy where I mentored kids online, and a lot of the kids came from wilderness. And some of them stayed on the right path, but a lot of them, I would mentor them for a few months. And after the first month, they started slipping. The third month, it seems like they're going back to bad habits again.
Shame. That's kind of a shame. Yeah. I think it's an interesting, what you said was an interesting idea and program and so on. But I think how beneficial to those kids to feel what it's like to wake up in the woods. Must be damn cool. But then they go back to their so-called real life, and suddenly their real life isn't in any way related to what they were doing, is it?
No, it's not.
Sad.
Yeah.
And you obviously like the feeling of a backpack on your back, because you then did a bit of backpacking around Europe. Where'd you go?
I guess I'm like a turtle now.
Where did you head to?
So I flew to Italy. I went to Naples, and from the app Workaway, I actually volunteered at a hostel called 6 Small Rooms, and I volunteered there for about a month. And I made beds, and I checked people in, and there was some free food offered, and there was free accommodations. So you can work away, and you can live for free, and you can travel. So it's definitely a really good way if you're on a budget to travel longer. So I stayed in Italy, in Naples for a month, and then I went up to a very small town in Italy, and I was an au pair. This is all through Workaway.
Yeah.
And this town was so small. I was there for about a month and everyone did the same thing every day. There was the same green truck that drove by the same time every day, the same old lady on her bicycle riding by. It was the same routine every single day. And I thought, if you committed a crime and you had to hide, or if you were in witness protection, this would be the perfect place.
Oh, dear. But now we're going to come to this year. What'd you do? Tell everybody what you did this year.
This year, I hiked to Mount Everest Base Camp.
Why?
Why?
It strikes me. You went on the AT to do something to prove to people you could do something. You did that. You got your confidence. You did the wilderness therapy. You learned barriers. You learned all those sort of things and that. But it feels to me, from the outside, who has never done Everest Base Camp, of course, and don't ever intend to either, that this is a step above. So, how did that idea come about?
So, in 2016, my dad died, and ever since he died, I take a trip for his birthday.
Oh.
And this year he would have been 80. And my friend and I were tossing around ideas. I said, how about Spain and Morocco? How about Greece and Turkey? And she comes back to me and says, Nepal is really good to go to in October. Why don't we go to Nepal? And I said, yeah, Everest Base Camp. And she was like, well, I was thinking like exploring in Nepal, like just, hanging out. And I'm like, no, we got to do Everest Base Camp. I'm like, let's do it. And I don't even know why my mind went there, but
yeah, I'm wondering that. Yeah,
what I think of when I think of Nepal. And she was like, okay, she agreed to do it, and it was just kind of on a whim. Like it was planned, maybe not even a year before.
Wow. So how do you prep for that? Because it's not just another hike, or maybe it is another. I don't even know. I've got no parameters to think about this. So tell us. How do you prep for it, and how did you learn how to prep for it?
I Googled stuff, how to prep for Everest Base Camp trek, and a friend of mine, Sarah Duma, her trail name is Carmen Sandiego. She did the AT the same year I did, and
I remember that name on the trail.
Yeah.
Good friend of mine. She did Everest Base Camp twice. So she gave me an itinerary, everything I needed to know. Like she was my guide. And I think she needs to write a guidebook on this.
Right.
So she was my trail angel in a sense. But she really helped me out with the planning and what I needed. But prepping, like basically I ran all summer. I ran up hills. There's a park down by my house, and I just ran up that hill every other day. I would run up it really fast. At first I couldn't run up it worth a crap, but then I built myself up and I was able to run. I'm like, I just want to build up my cardio. And that was my main thing.
Yeah.
Was getting my cardio up.
Yeah, but you can't prepare for as high as you're going to go, can you?
No, you can't.
So what did you, I know that when I went to try to do the John Muir Trail, I ended up doing Mount Whitney last year. I'd always struggled with altitude problems, in the past. And I took something called acetazolamide, I think it's called. Did you take some of that?
I took Diamox. I don't know the proper name of it.
Okay.
It may be the same thing. But I took Diamox, and that's a diuretic, and it helps shed water. So it helps your brain not swell, basically, people say.
Oh, God. So what are the logistics? So tell us, let's start with where you fly into.
So you fly into Lukla, and that's about 9,383 feet.
Could you feel that straight away?
I didn't feel that. Kathmandu is about 4,000 something, 4,500 or something like that.
Right.
So we stayed a few days in Kathmandu, and then flying over to Lukla, I didn't really feel it. And then you hike to Pakding from there, which is 8,563 feet. And you're hiking
downhill. Nice.
Yeah, you're hiking downhill.
Yeah.
I really felt it hiking up to Namche Bazaar. And Namche Bazaar is 11,290 feet. And I started getting a headache. There's about a 2-hour hike up this giant hill after this really high up suspension bridge. And these suspension bridges are terrifying because what is really holding them together? Are they inspected yearly? I don't know. There's yaks going across them, horses and people.
and you look down and there's gushing light blue water, glacier water, like hundreds of feet below you. And
Nice.
you're like, if you fall, you're dead.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that's the way it goes, I guess. So you were getting headaches, and when you got to the 11,000 feet, you still had another over 6,000 feet to go. How did you manage this? How did you manage it? Because I've always imagined it to be expensive. I know it's expensive to go to the top of Everest, but to Everest Base Camp, I always actually also thought that was expensive. But you said not so.
It's not. So we started on our own. We didn't have a guide. We didn't have a porter. But after climbing into Namche, we contacted Tenzing, a man that we met in Pakding, and he was able to get us a porter named Tenzing. Yeah.
As in Sherpa Tenzing, climbed with Edmund Hillary.
Yeah. I don't think it's the same one.
No.
But he was a very helpful person, and he got us a porter named Gopal. Uh-huh. And they charged us $12 a day.
Oh, my
US.
Gosh.
And that was $6 for me, $6 for Ashley. We, of course, tipped them good. But
we gave him another $5 or what?
Yeah, no, we tipped him nicely. But the accommodations, food is like $1 to $5 a meal. The accommodations are anywhere from like $3 to $10 for a bed at the tea houses.
Wow!
So it's very inexpensive. The most expensive part is the transportation there in a helicopter.
Oh, right. So yeah, that'll do it.
Your flights, your helicopters, that's the most expensive part. But once you're there, it is so affordable.
I'm going to ask the obvious. What does a porter do? Does he carry all your stuff, or do you just take some of your stuff? And what happens?
So he carried my duffel bag. So when I got to Namche, I bought a duffel bag whenever I knew we were getting a porter. And I kept my Osprey on. I have a 45-liter Osprey or 44-liter. And I kept my water bladder in there in my puffy jacket and just a couple essentials that I needed. And Ashley had a very small backpack, and she kept her small backpack on and gave Gopal her big backpack. And then he strapped my duffel bag outside of her backpack and hiked up with that. And that's a light load. If you see some of the Sherpas carrying these loads up, some of them had water on their backs, cases of water. This one man had something that looked like the size of a refrigerator, and he's hiking up the mountain faster than me. And I'm like they kept me going. They were my inspiration. I'm like, you got nothing on your back, girl. And look at these guys powering through.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. So what is it like? Does it feel like a regular hike? Was it, because you say you stay in the accommodation was tea houses, so you weren't in a tent or anything like that, were you?
No, we weren't in tents.
Did anybody camp?
I didn't see anybody camping on purpose, but some of the tea houses got very filled that they would have like big tents outside. So if the tea houses were too filled and you got there late or you didn't make a reservation beforehand, then you could be stuck in these tents. And I was like, there is no way I'm sleeping in one of these tents. Like, I'm a spoiled hiker now. I like my luxuries.
So tell us, what's the tea house like? And once again, I'm talking to somebody who's lived something entirely outside my experience. I'm always fascinated by that. And it's kind of my area, which is kind of hiking, but this is way higher than I ever want to go. And you're doing it in a different way as well. So what is the tea house? Is it basically a hostel?
It's kind of like a hostel. There's no bunk beds. The first one I walked into, you walk in, there's the main dining room. It's all wood, and there's a fire. There's like a wood burner in the middle. And they burn yak dung because
nice.
they dry the yak dung and they burn it. So the dining hall is the only thing that's heated. So you go in, you order your food, you tell them you want a bed, and the rooms are not heated. So the dining hall is heated, the rooms are not. You go down these long hallways to get to your cold room. Some of them have attached bathrooms. At first they do in the lower elevation villages. But the higher up you go, you have a shared bathroom.
Right.
And they're cold. The dining rooms are cozy, but the rooms are cold. And we would get in our sleeping bags, and we would have them fill up our water bottles or Nalgene's with boiling water, put them by our feet.
Yes.
And then they provided comforters. And then we would sometimes ask for an extra comforter, And the higher up in elevation you go, you would have to pay like 500 rupees for a comforter, which is it might be like $1 or two to use an extra comforter.
Oh dear. So how cold was it then at night?
I don't know. It didn't get terribly cold. Maybe like 18 degrees Fahrenheit may have been the coldest that it got at night.
So you got there. So you got to the end. You got to Everest Base Camp. And Everest Base Camp, I understand, is the jumping off point for Everest. Is that right? So does everybody do the trek you did to get there, or can they drive there?
You cannot drive there. You can helicopter in.
Oh,
or you can walk in.
That's fancy.
But I honestly don't know the people that actually do Everest. I don't know. My hopes are that they walk the whole way to get there.
Yeah.
Base camp. But if they helicopter in, you're helicoptering into 17,000 feet, and I think my guess would be they would do the whole trail to acclimate properly.
Yeah.
But that's just my guess.
And the higher you went, how were you coping with that altitude? Because it is quite substantially higher than anywhere you can go to in this country, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is. So I hiked up this giant hill from Tukla. I might not be saying the names right, but from Tukla to Lebuche was a giant, giant hill. It took a couple hours to get up, and I got a headache once again there. The Namche Bazaar one went away. I started taking Diamox in Namche, got rid of my pack, and I felt great. But after hiking up that huge hill into Lebuche, I got the headache. And the headache was so bad. I just remember sitting at the dining hall with like my forehead in my hand and just being like, I feel like total crap.
Oh, God.
And I got sick before that in Digbuche. I had a respiratory infection, bronchitis. I was on
win-win. Oh, God.
Yeah. So 14,000 feet, I get this respiratory infection.
Yeah.
I had so much snot coming out of my nose. I didn't realize a human being could have that much snot coming out of their nose. It was disgusting. My poor friend. I'm like, you're never going to travel with me again. I'm so gross.
That's funny. And you actually said something that kind of shocked me the other day. You said that somebody actually died from altitude sickness the day before you, they're in a place that you went to the next day or something like that. But then the thing that really shocked me was you said there are many rescue helicopters. So give us some idea of the scale of that.
Yeah, so we heard Gorakshep is about 16,900 feet. And we heard that a 30-year-old Malaysian girl died the day before we got there of altitude sickness in her sleep.
Wow.
And it just made everything feel so much more real.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of rescue helicopters, especially even in Namche Bazaar, there was quite a few. But the higher up you go, Lebuche, a helicopter would land, take off, another one would come, take off. And I'm like, I'm watching like 10 rescues, and it really feels real. You're like, oh my God, like you're not invincible. Like even the healthiest hiker can get sick.
Sure.
Like it has nothing to do. I went so slow, and I had an extreme headache. But yeah, it just makes it real. And we'd wake up in the middle of the night, and I would grab that oxygen thing you'd put on your finger. And I'm like, okay, if my oxygen is 75 or above, I'm okay. Like right at sea level, your oxygen's 75, and you better get to the hospital.
Yeah,
I'm at 16,000. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm at 75. My oxygen's great.
It's all relative, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Did you know how dangerous it could be before you went, or was this entirely new to you?
So I knew the dangers of altitude, but I didn't know it was that dangerous. I knew you could die, but I thought it doesn't really happen in my mind. That's what I was thinking.
Wow.
Like, I didn't realize how dangerous and how scary it could be. And from Lebuche, Gorakshep, like those two villages, they scared me. I wanted to get the heck back down. I just couldn't wait to be at a lower elevation because I was truly scared inside.
Wow. So, and you literally reversed the trip going down, I presume, which is a lot easier, no doubt.
Yeah. Well, right. So the first day, it wasn't very easy. We went to base camp, and our hike back down, I got sick that night. I had really bad diarrhea all night. And then in the morning, I couldn't eat. I had my oatmeal and I looked at it and I couldn't eat it. And that's unusual for me. Like I'm very food motivated and I'm like, yeah, this time. And I just scarf it down. But I'm like, I can't eat. And that whole day, everything I tried to eat gave me terrible indigestion. Everything I tried to drink gave me terrible indigestion. So I had an apple and maybe a half a liter of water, and we hiked 10 hours.
Oh dear.
And my friend's knee was so swollen, she couldn't even bend it. And that's when we decided to not finish hiking down to Lukla. And there's no right or wrong way. If you get to base camp, you've made it. That's the journey. That's the goal. It doesn't matter if you walk down, you helicopter out. But we decided we're gonna helicopter out because there's a sense where you're pushing yourself to your limits. I love it. Let's push to the limits. Let's see what we can do. And then there is knowing your limit and knowing when to stop and knowing like this is dangerous to my health. I need to get off this mountain.
I would think there must be quite a humbling experience to feel that. And I suppose the obvious question is, would you ever do it again?
No.
Or hell no.
Hell no. If I didn't get sick, maybe I would want to do it again. But I was so totally miserable that it just wasn't fun. It was beautiful and the landscapes were just out of this world. But I didn't appreciate them as much as I would have if I felt better.
Sure. But I suspect a lot of Western people tend to struggle a little bit anyway because of the lives we lead generally. It must be tougher for us to do that. But have you got any plans for any future hikes? Are you going to be hitting a trail again at some stage, or are you done now? Have you reached the limit of your endurance?
You never say never. I told myself I have nothing left to prove after this hike.
Quite right.
I do feel badass. I think about other trails. I think about the Camino. I think about the hikes down in Patagonia, like the W routes, the O routes. I think about the Colorado Trail. Every time in life I've said never, I've done it. So I never say never because you never know where you're going to be in life. Yeah,
you say hell no, but you never say never. Yeah, quite right.
You never say never.
Well, it's been lovely meeting a fellow member of the class of 2014, even though we didn't meet at the time. So, but I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing this story. And I've got to tell you, I listen to lots of people on the show, and I'm always think to myself, "Oh, I'd love to do that one. I'd love to do that one. I would not like to do the one you did at all." But I appreciate you coming and sharing the story with me. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed talking about it.
I'm sure. Thanks a lot. All the best.
Yeah,
cheers.
You too. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
I'm just a sucker for these women who take on any trail. That was one of my big takeaways from my 2014 hike. Just how fearless these ladies were, often largely outnumbered by men on the trail, but forging their own very independent paths. I hope I've been able to impress many of you over the years by bringing these women on the show. Sarah is definitely in that category, and with a yearly trip to commemorate her late father taking her to Everest Base Camp, what an adventure. But it's still one I do not want to do. And her wilderness therapy experience helped to keep her connection with the woods. And even if many of the kids did revert to problems after that therapy, you can almost guarantee that she touched somebody's heart and instilled a love of the outdoors that might not otherwise have been there. Now, last Saturday, I came home early from my usual Saturday routine to wait patiently for Jessica to finish her through hike. She told me that she and Mike would be crossing the bridge into Harpers at noon to officially complete their through hike. Unbeknown to her, one of our listeners, Hugh Ickrath, was also going to be there. Let's hear from Jessica. Spoiler alert, by the way, there are one or two tears here, but I think you'll work out that they were happy tears. Here's Jessica.
Hello.
You sound happy. How are you?
I am happy.
Congratulations.
I'm a thru hiker.
You are indeed a thru hiker. How about that?
Thank you.
How about that? I bet there were times you think that wasn't going to happen, but you made it and you got all the way to the end. So I was feeling a bit left out. You finished about 40 odd minutes ago, didn't you?
Oh my gosh. There's been so many people here. And
I'm sure. So we'll come to that in a minute. So tell us first what the last couple of days have been like.
Definitely cold.
Oh, dear.
Most of the time it hasn't gotten out of the 40s, but no snow or anything. Weather actually has been pretty good. The trail, every once in a while we were like, Pennsylvania threw up on Maryland. What happened here? But other than that, it was pretty okay. Yesterday we did a 17-mile day.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, because when we spoke
time was tough.
when we spoke last time, you were thinking of staying in that Airbnb. Did you stay a bit longer because the weather wasn't going to be so good?
Yeah, so we took a zero. It also kind of slowed us down so people could be here today.
Of course, yeah.
So we ended up taking a zero, and it was like below freezing temperatures and really high winds all day long. So we avoided that, and then just did 3 days to basically make it here on time.
So where'd you hang out last night?
Last night we were at a garbage shelter.
Nice. So you knew you were going to make it as soon as you hit that path. So tell us about your morning so far.
A lot of tears.
Of course.
A lot of tears, of course.
What about you? Or is that just Mike?
Yeah, it was both of us.
All right, good.
Definitely me. Yeah, it's weird to like get up in the morning and do the things that
of course
you just learned how to do for the last 9 months.
Yeah, you have.
And but knowing that it's the last time.
Yeah, that becomes kind of bittersweet when you think back on it as well. You think this is the last time I don't have to get up, don't have to walk tomorrow. I can just do nothing. If I want to do nothing, I can do nothing, and that's fine. It's all a good thing. So, how was the walk along the canal path? Because it's a lovely, easy, flat walk, isn't it?
Flat as anything, and and it was the last spot that I kind of connected the dots because I had hiked there before with a dear friend of mine who is in China right now and wished he could be here. But it was when I hit that spot, that was when the waterworks started again.
You know what? That's okay. Have as many waterworks as you like. You've worked hard for this. You've sweated blood and tears to get this far. So, and you were finishing just south of the bridge at Harpers Ferry. How many people were there? How many people there?
I couldn't keep track because everybody was moving around, but my husband and my dad are here, and Mike's family and some of his friends were here, and then of course Hugh Itra with his amazing sign was here, and we stood up on it, and of course I'll have to send you pictures and stuff. But
it didn't break. It didn't break.
It didn't break. We got both of us on it, he made that happen for us, which was so kind of him to spend the time and just make it happen. And we were standing up on that sign, and our friends and family are taking pictures, and a bit of a crowd was starting to gather because
who are these people?
People wandering around. Yeah, they're wondering what's going on.
Yeah, I bet. So I know you're not really going to fully comprehend what's happened today, or not for some time, I guess. But looking back, was it worth it?
Absolutely.
Was it?
Yeah, it was.
So when are you going to do the next big one?
Well, Mike's had the PCT map downloaded for a couple of months at this point. So I needed some time.
So
I need some time to get off my feet.
Yes, you absolutely do. And I know there was always a worry with your legs and your back and everything like that. So how have you held up at the end physically? How are you feeling now physically?
A couple of weeks ago, I was really feeling like I was fighting hard to not get sick.
Yeah.
And it wasn't terribly long after Mike had been sick, so that kind of made sense. My Achilles has been a problem since Vermont.
Sure.
Really. And I've been nursing that along, and my back has been the one thing that has never bothered me.
Isn't that interesting? Isn't that amazing?
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah, geez. So what's the plan what's the plan for the rest of the days? You haven't got to do any more walking.
I think we're going to try to find a place to get everybody in for lunch, and then I got to get to the airport to get my husband back on a flight so he can go to work, and me and my dad are driving. So
nice. Well, look, I'm so I'm so proud of you. I know it's not my right to be proud of you, but I am proud of you because you've done amazingly. You've done it all the way, and you've keep all of our listeners on the edge of their seats, and they've all supported you along the way. So I'm sure that part of it must make you feel good. What I'm hopefully going to do in a couple of weeks' time, I'm going to catch up with the others who finished this year, and obviously I'd like to catch up with you. But I could probably give you a month or so to get a few thoughts in order. And I don't want to keep you from your family now, but just many congratulations. It's amazing. It's the 23rd of bloody December and you're finishing now. That's just awesome. I'm so pleased for you.
Steve, before you go, I have to thank you so much because off the recording, we had a conversation in Maine when I was up in Maine.
Yeah.
And I basically said to you, when do we start talking about the fact that I'm not going to make it? And you believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself.
Oh,
and I can't thank you enough for that.
Oh, of course. You know what? You're making me cry now. Gosh, I've got tears in my eyes. I don't believe it. Oh, dear. Look, you know what?
I cannot thank you enough. That conversation, I don't think I'd be here without it.
Well,
thank you.
Well, of course, I've always been on your side, and I'm just so glad you made it. And let's face it, you are now a through hiker, and nothing can ever take that away from you now. You're a through hiker, so many congratulations, all right?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, I'll let you go and cry now, and I'll let you go now. But look, lovely to talk to you, and I'm so pleased you made it, and we'll speak very soon, okay? We'll speak next week and have a little chat or something, okay?
Okay.
Bye then.
Good.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Isn't that awesome? But before I talk a little bit about it, I wanted to play this short voicemail message, no more than a minute and a half, that Hugh left me as he wanted to share his thoughts on the day.
Hi, Mighty Blue. This is Hugh, your biggest fan. I was there yesterday to witness the end of Jessica's hike along with Mike as they reached Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. The two of them stopped short on the Maryland side and gathered their thoughts. And then around noon on the 23rd, yesterday, they crossed the bridge into West Virginia, and they were greeted by about 12 of us, friends and family, cheering and waving them on. And they blew right past us to make sure they reached that last sign. Mike stopped and kissed it, and they touched that sign many months ago in West Virginia there in Harpers Ferry. They then proceeded to come back to see the sign I had made for them, a replica of the sign on the top of Katahdin. We moved that sign underneath the existing signage that has the mileage to Georgia and Maine. They both individually stood on it to lots of claps and pictures. Jessica's dad had his mom on the phone witnessing it all, and they stood on the sign together to pictures and lots of tears. It was a great day. Thanks for all you do. Bye-bye.
You know, our listeners have been so wonderful to Jessica as she's been pushing her way to the end. As she does, I truly believe that she'd have been hard put to have finished had they not stepped up, and Hugh making that sign exemplified the kind of support that she's received. And as to Jessica, I feel like a friend has made it, and I know how that feels. The call she referred to was during a pretty dark time for her on the trail, and as a friend, I wanted to provide that support and just give her the little push when she needed it. We've often talked about support from friends and family, so I hope you've seen how much difference it can make. And as I said at the end, she'll be a through hiker forever. Nobody can take it away from her. And I know that her satisfaction of that fact will not diminish over the years. It'll only grow. But I did forget to mention that she's now the clock. Remember, Jessica, you've got about 3 weeks to tell everybody your stories. Then they'll want you to talk about something else, even though you won't want to. So there we are. I think we did pretty well in the end with our Mighty Blue class of 2023. It was definitely memorable for me, and I hope it was for you. Before we close out, I need to thank my lovely donors. Our recurring donors who stepped up once more are Brian Alsop, Jessica Diaz, Gregory Gertner, Bruce Brinker, Hugh Ickreth and Melanie Swisher. Thanks to you all as ever. Now, in such a poignant epilogue, George Stephanos concludes his story with a bit of a catch-up of his own. I'll see you next week. Epilogue, February 1997. Although I intended to end this story at the summit of Katahdin, somebody asked me the uncomfortable question. After all you accomplished in this quest to change your life, how did you let it all fall apart again? Ironically, I discovered that a last stand is ultimately final only if you lose. About 4 years and 1 month to the day that I stood beside the pond at Katahdin Stream Campground, experiencing the sweet taste of victory, I stood in a tiny cell as the steel doors slammed shut before me. My Sherlock Holmes analogy was all too apt. Like the literary creation, I too was prone to come alive only in moments of adventure and danger. The drug use that I found so amusing in 1983 grew into a major problem, and like Mr. Holmes, I fled from the monotony of ordinary life into the world of white powder. I lived a schizophrenic lifestyle for many years after this great adventure. I chased excitement and the thrill of exploration when I could, and courted danger and death when nothing else was available. I walked a dirt track around a tiny South Pacific island with my brother, visiting one gorgeous beach after another. The total tourist capacity of the island was 3 rooms, and most of those beaches didn't even have names. I trod deserted Manhattan streets at 3 a.m. I stood on the Continental Divide in Colorado in the rain, watching the raindrops splashing off my right shoulder begin their journey to the Pacific Ocean, while the water dripping from my left shoulder was on its way to the Atlantic. I stood in the middle of a housing project in Bridgeport, Connecticut, where life was cheaper than a vial of crack, watching junkies shoot up in the middle of open lots in broad daylight. I travelled back and forth across the country with my cousin in a Mustang convertible and climbed Mayan ruins in the Yucatan with my brother. I spent the dreariest month of my life crammed into a closet-sized jail cell with 2 other people in a facility that was under continuous 23.5-hour-day lockdown. The ensuing months in various other Connecticut jails and prisons were little better. Fulfilling my quest did not end all my problems forever. A person fights many final stands before the ultimate one, which we all lose. For more than a decade I have ached to tell this tale, but I could never get it to gel. Like the challenge chronicled in this book, that too began to seem a lost cause. The reason it took me all these years to write this story is that I needed all of this time to understand exactly what I was attempting to accomplish, exactly what I came away with, which were not necessarily identical. I've already written early in this story what the former was. The one great prize that I took with me from this adventure was that I'm no longer afraid to try, and I do not fear lost causes. I threw away my promise when I was young and foolish, and have spent the past 20 years toiling in dreary low-level jobs, working for people to whom my value as a human being was on the level of a mid-priced piece of machinery. My 1987 wake-up call led to a slow 10-year climb out of the abyss. Several months ago, I quit the latest dead-end job and struck out to sink or swim on my own, being my own boss and trying to make a living in a career which fascinates and challenges. As of this moment, it looks like another lost cause, but time will tell. What I lost sight of for a few brief years following this adventure was the meaning of life itself, at least what it means to be alive. Fiction can have happy endings, but life keeps going on and the battles keep coming. You cannot lay down and bask in your success when you reach the top of that mountain, because there's another one beyond, and it might even be higher and more rugged. And that's okay. As much as we enjoy reaching that mountaintop, the deeper satisfaction lies in the long, arduous journey itself. I am as firmly convinced now as I was then that, considering what I was and everything which happened to me early on in this hike, I was destined to lose this contest. As I've said, losing a struggle into which you have invested everything you have is painful, but winning a lost cause is a moment which will shine in your memory forever. October the 3rd, 1983, Baxter Peak. About 15 people were on the summit of Baxter Peak when I arrived. After taking in the views for a while, I took a picture of myself standing next to the Appalachian Trail sign, propping the camera up on some rocks and using the self-timer. There was actual sunshine up on the peak. Much of the haze had disappeared, and it continued to clear as I walked around the summit. A fairly strong breeze was blowing, so I put on my chamois shirt, but it was still surprisingly warm. After all the crazy weather I had experienced these 5 months, I suppose it was only fitting that, at the end of the trail, I should be standing atop a 5,000-foot summit in northern Maine in the month of October, feeling comfortable in shorts with a heavy shirt thrown over a sweaty T-shirt. What a long, strange trip it's been. I guess I looked like a through hiker. A girl walked over to me with a big smile. "This must be a big moment for you," she said. I said, "Yeah." She asked, "How come you're not more excited?" I shrugged. Eventually she walked away, looking confused. How could I explain to her what I could not yet explain to myself? I stayed up there for about a half hour before starting back down. It was a comparatively easy and uneventful trip. The clouds closed in again, but that was okay. I'd experienced my moment in the sun on Katahdin. I arrived at the ranger's house in Katahdin Stream Campground at 3:30. My mother had been there sometime in the late morning. A note she had left with my stuff told me she would be back to pick me up around 3 o'clock. Since it was already half past that time, I wasn't overly optimistic. I sat down at a picnic table in the middle of a clearing next to the little pond formed by a dam on Katahdin Stream and wrote in my journal until almost 6 o'clock. Katahdin was once again totally obscured in clouds, having faded back into the mists of northbound through hikers' dreams. I tried to touch the excitement I had always felt when I envisioned myself standing on this spot back in the darker days of the adventure, but I couldn't. Being human is to be in a continual process of remaking yourself. As years pass, you become a different person. Sometimes a monumental event can accelerate that process to a few weeks or months. The man who hiked the southern Appalachians could have felt that excitement were he here today. Time expands on the Appalachian Trail. I'd been serene and confident about the journey's outcome for a long time. I could no longer touch his sense of hopelessness and despair. I was no longer he. I spent a lot of time talking to people who stopped by my table, wanting to touch greatness or something. I guess it was my 15 minutes of fame. Eventually the place quieted down. Campers started cooking their dinners and the aromas were playing havoc with my stomach. I had eaten all the food I had. There was nothing for me to do except be hungry and wait for my ride. As I sat there, something happened. I looked up from my journal writing for a moment and was immediately transfixed by the sight before me. I slowly stood and walked down to the edge of the pond in order to make the picture complete. The clouds had cleared once again. A man I had thought gone forever returned to me one final time. And so together we stood next to the pond, staring across the water and over the surrounding evergreen forest towards the naked granite summit of Mount Katahdin. The sun had already set upon the campground, but its last fleeting rays were crowning that summit with a rich golden alpenglow. It was the evening after, rather than the evening before my climb, but it really did not matter. 10 minutes later, Katahdin was back behind the clouds.